So then obviously the big purchase of the day was a Makita 6.5-inch track saw, or plunge cut circular saw. Now I talked about this in the bed frame that we're currently working on, how I think that a track saw is going to be the solution to cutting my ends square, cleaning up or doing the tenon work and all that. So I think I have high hopes that this is going to be overall a better solution. But this is also the best solution just in general to the shop, because now I can do more stuff with panels. When I do breadboard ends on tabletops and that, I can make sure that I have that square edge, because again, I've been using that circular saw to do all of my breadboard ends in that, so it's no wonder that I've had some issues with those in the past. So I'm hoping that this will just kind of solve all of my circular saw issues that I've had in the shop. But you might be wondering why I didn't go with Festool or DeWalt or Triton, any of the other brands, and mainly Festool, because that's the one that everyone is kind of obsessed with. The biggest thing is just price point. So this Makita saw that I got, plus the 55-inch track that I got behind me here, was a total of $619. Then it was an extra $2 for that other stuff, which is just kind of fun. The equivalent Festool saw that comes with the track is $900. So the one thing I could not justify was the extra $300 for the Festool. Because looking all over online, all that I was really getting that the difference between the Makita and the Festool is that the Festool is just better. There wasn't really a good enough explanation for me. There wasn't something that was enough of a selling feature on the Festool versus the Makita to just make it worth that much more. But the biggest thing is the track cost, because the track cost is what's going to play into especially what we're going to be doing in a couple days here. And that is this Makita track, the 55-inch one, is $84. The same 55-inch Festool track is 200 something bucks. So I don't remember exactly what it is, but I know it's over 200. That's a massive difference. And what we're going to be doing with this Makita track in order to make it so that we can actually square up the ends of these boards. Now this might sound crazy to a lot of people, but I found that it's actually a pretty common thing. The whole purpose of these tracks is that you cut them down to be the size that you need them to be. And so eventually I would rebuy another 55-inch track and keep it as a 55-inch track. I'd probably buy 2 more of them and some joinery things so that I could, break down sheets of plywood and that kind of stuff. But for now, the most important thing that I need in the shop is just some way to break down long boards. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to take about 15 or 20 inches off of one end, then I'll still be left with a good long section that I can use to do, work on small tables and stuff like that. So these 2 small sections that I'm going to cut this one track into are going to be great to just have around the shop. And again, as soon as I need a longer track, all I have to do is go and buy it, and it's only $84. Whereas with the Festool one, if I was to cut that down, then when I need a new one, that's $200. So that's a very big price difference, and I couldn't find any measurable quantitative reason to go with the Festool over the Makita. Obviously, Festool is going to be better. I know that, I understand it, because at this point in time, I don't need the best of the best tools, so I think that this Makita is going to be just about perfect for what I need. But yeah, let's do an unboxing, because I think it might be kind of fun to just see what some of these tools look like, to play around with them. I definitely want to try just making some cuts today, just so I have an idea of what I'm working with here. Okay, so first up is the GRS16. So this is just a straight edge guide for either a Makita, Festool, or Triton track saw. Oh. Alright, nothing like making packaging easy to damage so you can't return things. Wow, fancy. Free sticker. That's always exciting. But anyway, yeah, you can see that it's a super simple thing, but the trick is here that it's a precisionally machined chunk of, I believe it's aluminum. It just clamps right onto your track, gives you a perfectly square edge. So that basically takes your track and turns it into a giant T-square. So what I read is if you have a track saw, you really want to have one of these things or some kind of angle gauge for it, because these are supposed to be really, really good. Next up, we got the actual guide rail. Again, in more packaging that is super easy to damage. But I'll give it to Makita. It's pretty decently well packaged in there. Now, the number one thing that I've read that people complain about when buying any, doesn't matter what brand of track saw, is you need to check the track. So I'm gonna make sure I do that, check it for, square and flat and all that before I fully start cutting into it. But overall, that's a pretty clean looking track right there. I mean, that looks good to me. We got some nice rubber or plastic. Not rubber. So we got rubber on the edges there, foam on the back here for gripping. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand how that works because the foam definitely feels slightly thicker than the plastic that's on the front, or that rubber that's on the front edge that's meant to be cut off. So I have no idea how track saws work, but I'm excited to get using it. So now the piece de resistance, if I can get into it anyway. I mean, again, it's not Festool. I'm not expecting, like, you know, to open the box and have angels sing or anything, but yeah, that's a saw. That is a big saw. Jeez. I have no idea what size my my little rigid one is, but overall, that's a. Oof. I'm going to be reading through most of the instruction manual before we actually kick this thing off. I just want to say that because a lot of people just throw out the instruction manual, don't ever actually look at it. I peruse it, I'll say that much. I think it is important to try and look through, especially the areas that the manufacturer like obviously wants you to look through. So yeah, that's just one of those things I will say is that you should definitely, especially when it's a new tool like this. You know, like when I bought my Bosch sander, I didn't read through the instruction manual because it's just a random orbital sander. You know, there's nothing you really need to know about. But with this track saw, there's a lot going on that I don't know anything about. So I'm definitely going to just take a quick read through this, figure out what I'm doing with it before I actually start cutting with it. Overall, that's a pretty beefy looking tool. It comes with a blade installed. That's always nice, I guess. I mean, kind of an expected thing. Yeah, I really. Okay, so we got. Let's see what we got here. Okay. The one thing that I do find interesting about these track saws, though, is that they don't have a whole lot of cutting distance. Like, even from the base of this thing down, we have about 2 inches. Then when you mount it on the track, you're going to lose probably at least 1/4 of an inch there. Maybe not 1/4 inch. But they don't cut very deep. The only annoying thing about Makita is that it's all in millimeters, which is, you know, very, very European of them. But again, we do have that depth stop on there, so that's where I'm really excited to use that for like our tenons and that, because we can fairly easily set this up so that when we plunge in, we just cut our shoulder lines of our tenons. So overall, this is going to be way cleaner than using the router to cut the tenons, and faster overall, because I just lay the track down with the square and all that on it. It'll just square right up against the board and make my pass, and I know that I'm good to go. Everything is very easy to line up. There's no 2 and 25, 30 seconds measurements that I have to make every single time I need to cut one of those tenons. So, okay, food has been eaten, instructions have been read, and I have a pretty good understanding of how to use this thing now, and it overall is actually not that complex, which is really beautiful. So I will say the only thing I don't quite understand is there's 2 little black knobs on the side here. I have no idea what those do. I couldn't find anything in the instructions about those specifically, so I'm going to keep reading and I think they might be for some accessory, something like that, because I didn't read through all the accessory components, so that would be my guess, is that's for some kind of add-on accessory later on. But anyway, what is really cool that I'm finding about this is that they really did think about a lot of different stuff. So these 2 little knobs, these kind of like wing nut looking things, those are specifically so that we can get the saw perfectly level. So like I experienced with the rigid saw here, where we are always cutting at just a little bit of an angle there, what we can do with this saw is if we're noticing that we're cutting at that little bit of an angle, we can adjust it, which is the beautiful thing here compared to just a normal circular saw. So this has some minor adjustments just built into it that we can use to make sure we're staying nice and square here. So we also have this little locking knob, so all this does is just pushes a little disc out that sticks into the track here and just adds a little bit of a hook to it so that the saw can't tip to the right side. Because when you put the saw on the track, you can tip it in like that and lay it down, or you can just not have this thing extended and just drop it in. Either way works, but that tab prevents you from accidentally tipping the saw this way, which I think is a really good feature. Again, pretty important to have. Obviously, we have the depth stop on the front here, so we can use this to go to a more controlled depth, which again, we'll be using that on our tenons. On the front here, we have different angles, all with specific detents. So right now we're at 22.5, and I don't know what the other one is. Honestly, I don't really know exactly how all this stuff works, but it seems something works here. Again, I got a lot more reading to do. I don't plan to really be using angles. I have no idea clearly what I'm doing here because it's kind of jammed up. I'm not going to mess with it too much. So there is one kind of interesting feature on here though, and it's this little locking knob right back here. So when you push that little knob in, it limits your plunge to 2 to 3 centimeters. Again, it's weird that the manual would give you a range there. I would think that it would be a set thing, but it says 2 to 3 millimeters. And so you can use that for making a scoring cut. So if we're working with melamine, basically any plywood, you can very easily make a scoring cut, which will leave a lot less tear out and all that. Then you can go and finish it through with a through cut. So overall, I'm fairly impressed with everything that goes into this. There is one feature that I kind of forgot about when I was looking into this, a feature that I kind of wanted, but I don't know, unless I want to return this and go Festool, I'm not going to get, and that is a riving knife. So the Festool plunge saws, when you plunge down, they have a riving knife that comes out the back here, and that helps. That is a massive thing to help prevent kickback. Now, for the most part, I'm only going to be using this on finished panels. So the chances of us getting pretty nasty kickback, I've never experienced kickback with my rigid circular saw. You know, I've had areas where it's binded up, I've had stuff like that, but it's one of those features that I'm not super obsessed, about needing to have on a tool. Anyway, enough talking, we're just going to try and make some cuts in this. So I've got some MDF, I've got some melamine I want to try cutting, and we've got that leftover stretcher from this project here that we're going to try cutting. Even though it's only a 4-inch section, I've still got a 55-inch long track here. I'm just going to set it up and see what I can do with it, and that'll really tell me whether or not I actually need to cut this track down, because I'm still kind of on the fence about that. Okay, so you remember how I said I didn't know what these knobs were for? I obviously just missed it in the instructions, but what that does is it takes all the slop out of the track. So when I put the saw on, I was like, there seems like there's a lot of slop to this. It's not going to cut very straight if it's wobbling around like that. So all I did was I was just messing around with those knobs, thinking that they must do something. And I tightened them up enough, and now we don't have any slop to this. It's sliding perfectly straight through the track. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm actually genuinely impressed by how well it actually glides. So. Okay, so I just finished doing a little bit of the 5-cut method on this piece of MDF here. Now, not doing it actually because there's a whole bunch of actual math in that involved. I don't really care that much. All I want to know is that when I make a cut, is it going to be square to the edge that I'm referencing? So again, I only have a little 6-inch square here, which is probably something I need to solve, and I probably should have solved when I was at Lee Valley. But when I check it, it's actually perfectly squared up. So the fact that we can just drop this track on with this little guide piece back here, line it up to whatever edge we want to match, and it cuts a nice square line, I think that's perfect. That's all I really need. And again, the most important thing for what we're going to be doing on this project anyway is that on this 6-inch square, I can see that I'm good. So those 4-inch boards, I don't think are going to be any issue. Anyway, I'm going to bring that piece of 8-core walnut over here, and we're just going to try it again. I think it's going to be hard to actually get the track balanced over that 4-inch piece, but we're just going to give it a shot because right now I just kind of want to know what the limits of this saw are, because again, if it can't handle that 8-quarter stock, then there's really no point owning a saw like that. That is a perfect cut, both on the vertical and the horizontal. Oh, you guys do not know how good this feels right about now. So it's definitely a little bit sketchy. So what I'm going to do when I actually have to do boards like this is I'll put a couple of them on the workbench. That way the track on the far side has something to actually lay on, because just having that whole 55-inch section when I was doing this is a little bit clumsy. But just by moving this GRS square up a little bit, we got the center of balance of the track a little bit better. So I may decide to not even cut down the track, because if I don't have to cut it down, I really don't want to. If I could just support it on either side. But I also don't know if it'd be a bad thing to have a nice short track for doing stuff exactly like this. But that is exactly what I wanted to see. And I tried, and I intentionally right there did the worst case scenario. So I did the full cut on the first pass, which is something that we determined is something you don't really want to do. So when I'm actually doing those work pieces with the hard maple, what I will do is I will do a couple passes. So I'll do like 2 smaller passes, just that way we're getting the best results as possible. And the reason that this is working so much better than the circular saw is just, I think it's purely because we're following that track. There's an actual guide for this thing to follow. So I am super psyched. This is the solution to so many problems in the shop. Everything from long boards to tabletops to cutting breadboard ends to just generally working with panels. And there's one thing that is really important to add to the video here. This is in no way sponsored by Makita, KMS Tools, who else did I talk about? Lee Valley, I think that's it. Or the Bottle Depot that I talked about at the very beginning. This is not a sponsored video. No one has sponsored me to say any of this. And this is also not like a recommendation or a review. I've literally owned this saw for 4 hours and I've only been playing with it for about 2.5. So this is not a glowing recommendation. This is not a go out and buy yourself a Makita track saw. That will come probably in the next year or so. You know, I usually use a tool for at least a year before I try to drop a review or recommendation on it. So we're gonna see how this thing holds up. But right now I am just super thrilled because as you guys saw in this bed frame that I'm working on right now, it has been such a nightmare just getting these panels sized up, getting the long board sized up properly. Whereas now all I have to do is lay this track, push that square right up against our nice straight edges, make a cut, and we now have a square board. And the best part is this isn't just a single duty thing. I can use this to help cut the tenons, all that kind of stuff. Then obviously I know you all want to see the Makita sustainer cases or stackable locking cases. I think sustainer is specific to Festool. Whatever. Yes, the beautiful case. Look how awesome it is. I finally have a big plastic box that is going to take up room in my shop. I don't know why I got it, but it was $1 and I don't really regret paying $1 for a giant plastic thing. So it might be useful for something. I don't plan to keep the saw in it. Actually, I might. It's a pretty expensive tool that I kind of want to keep safe. So maybe I will end up using this. So as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one.